I know there's been back and forth on whether Acting Secretary Wolf should have been here, whatever the reason. Given that this is a worldwide threats hearing, the Secretary should have come here. And this idea that someone under Senate confirmation can't appear is actually factually incorrect. I know that since I was under Senate confirmation when I was called to testify many times. Let me ask about, I think, Mr. Wray, you've been really helpful in just being straight and clear about kind of the threats that are going on out there. Can you talk about level of effort on extremist violence, domestic extremist violence? You've talked about in this hearing how you're seeing 2019, I think you said, was one of the greatest levels of domestic violence we've seen in the country for some time since Oklahoma City. Can you tell me how many cases you have open, and if you don't know the exact number, just approximately, you have open on groups that are white supremacist versus groups that are coming from the left? Just level of effort that the FBI is employing right now.
Well, trying to think what I can say, certainly off the top of my head on numbers. I mean, I will say that, let me start with this. As a general rule, we have, each year lately, we've been having roughly 1,000 domestic terrorism investigations a year. It's higher than that this year. Yeah. You know, a good bit north of 1,000 this year. I know that we've had about 120 arrests for domestic terrorism this year. Now, that number of investigations, the 1,000 plus and the 120 arrests, that's domestic terrorism across the board, right? Everything from racially motivated violent extremists to violent anarchist extremists, militia types, sovereign citizens, you name it. Of the domestic terrorism threats, we last year elevated racially motivated violent extremism to be a national threat priority commensurate with homegrown violent extremists, that's the jihadist-inspired people here, and with ISIS.
So let me, because that's important, right? That what you're saying is the level of threat from domestic terrorists across the board, regardless of ideology, is at the same level as homegrown terrorists that have connections to a foreign terrorist organization. Is that, did I hear you correctly?
We're treating it as a commensurate priority in terms of warranting our attention and resources, yeah.
But I mean, I'm assuming you're giving it that attention because it deserves that attention, because the threat has elevated from a time when, I mean, I'm a former CIA officer. We were doing a lot of foreign terrorism nexus stuff, you know, 2005, 6, 7 through the last, 10 years. So it's interesting, I think, that domestic terrorism has elevated in the FBI's eyes. I'm just...
Yes.
And I think the thing that we're all struggling with is, there are these homegrown terrorists of every flavor and type, but just in the number of either cases or arrests, how many of them are white supremacist? What is the, if not the exact number, is it the same as other types of domestic terrorism? Is it higher? Just give us a level of approximate numbers.
Well, what I can tell you is that within the domestic terrorism bucket, category as a whole, racially motivated violent extremism is, I think, the biggest bucket within that larger group. And within the racially motivated violent extremist bucket, people ascribing to some kind of white supremacist type ideology is certainly the biggest chunk of that.
Okay,
I don't
that's
have
very
numbers
helpful.
for you.
That's very helpful. Yeah. So the white supremacists are the largest chunk of the racially motivated domestic terrorists.
But let me also say, that, and I would also add to that, racially motivated violent extremists over recent years have been responsible for the most lethal activity in the U.S. Now this year, the lethal attacks, domestic terrorism lethal attacks we have I think all fit in the category of anti-government, anti-authority, which covers everything from anarchist violent extremists to militia types. We don't really think in terms of left-right. We have.
Yep, I understand.
That's not the way we look at the world.
I understand. And in just my last seconds, I'll be submitting some questions for the record for Mr. Wolf, commensurate with the questions that I submitted to Chairman Milley on the role of the Department of Homeland Security in and around our elections and the peaceful transition of power.